The shouting began the moment I walked through the church doors. My Aunt Clara grabbed my arm like she wanted to crush the bones, her eyes wild, her face red. "You will not touch what she left you or regret it forever," she screamed. My Uncle David lunged forward, shoving a thick envelope into my chest. "Sign this. Now. Or don't blame us for what happens next." I stumbled back, my heart hammering. "What? What is this? Grandma's things are hers. Why are you stopping me? You don't understand." Clara shrieked. "That box she left you. It can ruin everything. It must never be opened. Burn it. Bury it. Anything but open it." The church erupted. Cousins shouted. My siblings yelled over each other. The pastor tried to intervene, but his voice was drowned out by a storm of anger, fear, and desperation. The air reeked of perfume, sweat, and fury. I felt surrounded, trapped. Every adult I had trusted since childhood was screaming at me, threatening me, warning me as if I held a live grenade in my hands. Then Mr. Hayes, Grandma's lawyer, stepped forward, holding a small heavy metal box. He placed it in my hands with deliberate care. "This was left only to Mara," he said. "No one else." Immediately the room erupted again. My uncle shouted, "Give it to me. You don't know what you're holding." My aunt cried, "You must destroy it. Now." My cousins looked like they were ready to fight over it like it was a treasure chest or a bomb. I clutched the box, shaking. My chest burned with adrenaline. Their words, their fear, their desperation. Every single one of them was focused on me and this box. It wasn't about inheritance. It wasn't about Grandma anymore. It was a war. I backed toward the door, heart racing, the weight of their eyes drilling into my back. Their anger was tangible. Their fear was electric. And somewhere deep inside, I realized this was just the beginning. Even as I left the church, I could hear their voices behind me, escalating again. "Do you want to destroy this family?" Clara shouted. "Do you want blood on your hands?" My Uncle David's voice shook. "You can't trust it, Mara. Don't let it ruin us all." I pressed the box to my chest and walked faster. The air outside hit me like a cold wave, but it didn't cool the storm inside my head. My thoughts were racing. What could be inside the box that terrified them so much? Why did Grandma leave it only for me? And most importantly, could I even trust my family to tell the truth? By the time I reached my car, I could barely breathe. I sat in the driver's seat, hands still trembling around the box. I thought of Grandma's warm smile, of her gentle voice when I was a child. But now those memories felt distant, overpowered by the chaos I had just left behind. Could she have known this day would erupt in war? Could she have known that the thing she left me would turn her family against me before I even had a chance to mourn? That night I couldn't sleep. I placed the box carefully on the dining table, the metal cold and heavy under my fingers. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps in the hallway. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, threatening. Hours passed. My thoughts kept circling the same questions. What was inside? Why were they all so terrified? And if I opened it, would it really ruin lives? At 1:14 a.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My pulse jumped. I opened the message and read 8 words that made my stomach tighten and my hands tremble. "Don't open the box. What's inside can ruin lives." I stared at the box, then at the message, my mind spinning. The room was silent, but I could almost hear the echoes of the yelling from earlier. The anger, the fear, the desperation. I realized the fight in the church wasn't just about inheritance or jealousy. It was about secrets, long held and dangerous, that my grandmother had trusted only me to inherit. And in that moment I understood something terrifying. The conflict wasn't over. It had just begun. I looked at the box, feeling the weight of it in my hands, and a single question burned louder than fear or curiosity. If your entire family begged you to destroy something left to you, would you obey them? Or would you open it to discover the truth? Mara sat at her small dining table, the metal box looming before her like a shadow from the past. The city outside her window was quiet, the hum of distant traffic barely audible, yet inside her apartment every sound seemed amplified. The tick of the clock, the occasional creak of the floorboards, even the faint rattle of the box as she shifted it slightly. All of it pressed into her mind with unbearable intensity. She remembered her grandmother's last months vividly, though she hadn't wanted to. Those were the months Mara had thought were filled with age and fatigue, But now they replayed differently. There had been the sudden warnings, the whispered phrases in a panicked voice. Mara, some doors are better left closed. And trust no one but yourself, child. There had been nights when Grandma had fallen silent mid-sentence, staring into the corner of the room as if someone was there, someone Mara couldn't see. And then there was the day Grandma pressed something into Mara's hands, eyes wide and trembling, saying, "One day the truth will choose you, even if you don't want it." Mara's fingers traced the edges of the box. She lifted it slightly, giving it a gentle shake. Inside there was a sound, a faint metallic clang, like the collision of two pieces of metal. Her pulse quickened. Whoever had owned this box before her, whoever had touched it, hid it or feared it, had left a mark. And now it was hers. She examined it closely. There were faint scratches along the lid, delicate but deliberate, as if someone had tried to pry it open and failed. The thought made Mara shiver. Has someone wanted this secret before her? Has someone wanted to bury it forever? The next day, unable to bear the anxiety alone, Mara called her mother. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Mom, do you know anything about this box? About Grandma?" There was silence on the other end. Then her mother's voice cracked. "Mara, I can't talk about it. Some things are better left alone. I'm sorry." The words came out in sobs, unsteady and breaking. Mara wanted to press further, to demand the truth, but a strange dread stopped her. Whatever was hidden in that box had scared her mother. And if it had scared her mother, someone Mara had always thought was strong and wise, then Mara was dealing with something far beyond ordinary fear. Alone again, Mara's mind raced. She remembered the words her grandmother had whispered when she was 10 years old. "One day the truth will choose you, even if you don't want it." She had never understood what that meant, and now the words hit her with a heavy, suffocating clarity. The truth had chosen her. She had no choice. Hours passed as she turned the box over in her hands, feeling the weight of its mystery. The scratches, the cold metal, the faint metallic clang. All of it seemed alive, as if it were trying to communicate. Mara realized she wasn't just holding a box. She was holding a decision. And decisions like this, she knew from bitter experience, could change everything. Finally, driven by an uneasy mixture of fear and curiosity, Mara lifted the box and turned it over. Her eyes caught something taped underneath. A photograph, yellowed with age, careful but deliberate in placement, hiding beneath the weight of the box for decades. Mara's hands shook as she peeled it away. Her breath caught. In the photograph, her grandmother was younger, vibrant, and smiling, but she was standing next to a man the family had never spoken of. Mara's mind raced. Who was he? Why had the family erased him from every memory, every story, every photograph in the house? And most importantly, what connection did he have to the box? Mara stared at the photograph for what felt like hours. The mystery deepened. Every fiber of her being told her that the box and the man in the photo were linked. But how? And why had her grandmother entrusted her with this secret, if even her mother had feared it? She set the photograph down, the weight of the unanswered questions pressing into her chest like a physical force. Her mind replayed every interaction from the funeral. The screaming, the threats, the frantic attempts to seize the box. Every scream, every glare, every desperate plea made sense now. Her family hadn't been arguing over money or possessions. They had been guarding something far more dangerous. And Mara knew deep in her gut that the next step, figuring out the box, would make everything even more dangerous. Do you think some truths should stay buried, even if they choose you? Mara sat back, staring at the photograph, her fingers tracing the edge of the box. Somewhere deep inside, a knot of anticipation and fear twisted tighter. She had opened her first layer of suspicion, but she knew it was only the beginning. And beneath the box, taped and forgotten for decades, the photograph suggested that secrets far older, far darker, and far more dangerous than she could imagine were waiting for her. Mara had spent the night turning the photograph over in her hands, unable to sleep. Every creak of her apartment seemed amplified, every shadow suspicious. The next morning, she resolved she could no longer wait. If she wanted answers, she had to go to the source, the old family home. It was quiet now, abandoned since the funeral, but the memories it held were loud enough to echo through every room. The drive there was tense. Every mile seemed to carry whispers of the past. As she approached the house, The peeling paint and overgrown yard made her stomach tighten. The home had always been a place of comfort once, filled with the smell of baking bread and the laughter of her grandmother. But now it felt like stepping into a fortress of secrets, each corner holding a memory that didn't belong entirely to her. The front door was unlocked. Another warning, or perhaps an invitation. Mara hesitated only briefly before stepping inside. The familiar scent of old wood and faint lavender hit her immediately, mixing with a strange sense of foreboding. She moved cautiously through the rooms, her eyes scanning every shelf, every table, every cabinet. Her first stop was her grandmother's study, a room that had once felt like the center of her family's world. But it was different now. The journals, carefully kept for decades, filled with Grandma's handwriting, private thoughts and secrets, were gone. Mara's heart skipped a beat. Someone had been here, someone had taken them, and they knew she would eventually come searching. A wave of panic rose, but she pushed it down. She needed to keep going. Her grandmother's sewing table, tucked in a corner of the living room, had always fascinated her. Mara knelt before it, running her fingers over the polished wood. The table had a history of secrets. Her grandmother had once told her, in a hushed tone, that some memories were too dangerous to leave out in the open. Mara's fingers traced every groove, every carved edge, and then, almost by instinct, she pressed lightly on the underside of a drawer. There was a faint click. She pulled it open and gasped. Inside, she found a collection of items that made her pulse race and her hands shake. A torn piece of a letter lay folded at the bottom of the drawer. The edges were brittle, the handwriting familiar yet strange. It mentioned a name Mara did not recognize, a hospital, and a date that did not match any known family event. She set it aside, realizing its significance would become clear only in pieces. Next, she found a small brass key. Its surface was dull, but its weight was substantial. Mara held it up to the light, turning it over and over in her hands. The key felt like a piece of her grandmother's legacy, a hint of the answers waiting somewhere hidden, waiting for the right person. Finally, she found a photograph. It was small, slightly faded, yet striking in its intimacy. Her grandmother held a newborn baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket. A hospital number tag was pinned carefully to the blanket, almost like a secret identifier, a silent testimony to a life the family had never mentioned. Mara's chest tightened. Who was this child? Why had the family erased him or her from every memory, every photograph, every story? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of footsteps in the hall. Mara's heart jumped. Before she could hide or respond, voices called out, "Mara, what do you think you're doing?" She turned to see her uncle and a few cousins standing in the doorway, their faces a mixture of anger and fear. "Get out," her uncle bellowed. "You're not welcome here." Mara took a cautious step back. I need answers," she said, her voice firm despite the trembling of her hands. "I need to know the truth." Her cousin leaned closer, his voice a whisper, almost lost among the raised shouts. "Mara, you need to stop. That box destroyed her once. Don't let it destroy you." Mara froze, the words hanging in the air like a warning carved in stone. Her family had spent decades hiding secrets, burying truths, and protecting themselves from something that had hurt her grandmother so profoundly it scared them all. And now, by seeking answers, she was stepping directly into a fire they had spent years containing. As she left the house, clutching the torn letter, the photograph, and the brass key, her mind raced. She returned to her apartment, shutting the door behind her with a sense of finality. She tried the brass key on the box. It didn't fit. Her heart sank and then surged with a mix of relief and terror. Relief because the box remained closed for now. Terror because it meant there was another lock somewhere else, another puzzle, another barrier before the truth could surface. Mara sat back, holding the items on her lap, staring at the box. The clues were all there, yet hidden. The box had chosen her, but now the pieces of the past, the letters, the key, the photograph, were demanding that she follow them. The truth was calling her name, insistent, unyielding, and dangerous. If your family was hiding a secret child, would you want to know who they were? Mara looked at the brass key again, turning it over in her hands, the metal cold against her palm. She realized that unlocking the box would be only part of the journey. There were layers, protections, secrets designed to keep the past buried. But Mara also understood something else. The past had already chosen her. And if she hesitated too long, someone else might come for the truth before she could uncover it. Her apartment was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. But somewhere in the shadows of the past, a secret waited. And Mara knew with a certainty that made her chest ache. This was far from over. The city streets blurred past Mara as she drove to Mr. Hayes's office. The brass key, the torn letter, the photograph. They all felt heavier now, like weights tethered to the dark unknown. Her mind raced, turning over every interaction, every whispered warning, every desperate glare she'd seen at the family home. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The office smelled faintly of old books and polished wood, a scent Mara had always associated with trust and authority. Yet as she stepped inside, she felt none of the comfort she remembered from past visits. Today the room felt like a cage, the walls closing in with the secrets they had held for decades. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice firmer than she felt, "I need the truth. Everything. My grandmother left me a box. She left me a photograph, letters, keys, and no one in my family will speak. I can't do this alone. Tell me, what's really happening?" The lawyer sighed, sitting back in his chair. His hands, aged and precise, steepled in front of him. For a long moment he said nothing, and the silence pressed down on Mara like a physical weight. Finally he spoke. "Your grandmother," he began, "changed her will 3 weeks before she passed. Something your family hated deeply. They saw it as a betrayal, a threat to everything they thought they controlled. But your grandmother, she had reasons. Reasons you are only now beginning to understand." Mara's pulse quickened. Reasons? What reasons? He hesitated, eyes narrowing, as if choosing his words with care. "She feared someone in the family," he said quietly. "Not all of them, but someone. She made sure to protect you specifically, even if it angered them. That box, the photograph, it was all part of a plan to make sure you inherited what she wanted you to see, and no one else interfered." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small sealed envelope. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and smelled faintly of lavender, a scent Mara instantly recognized as her grandmother's. "She left this for you," he said, pressing it into her hands. "And she wrote one instruction. Open this only when you are alone." Mara's hand shook as she held the envelope. She turned it over, reading the words again. The gravity of it pressed down on her chest like a stone. Carefully, she tore it open in the quiet of her apartment later that evening. Inside was a single sentence, scrawled in her grandmother's handwriting. "You're not who you think you are." The words echoed in her mind, reverberating through every memory, every childhood moment she thought she understood. Mara sank into her chair. Not who she thought she was. The thought clawed at her. Was it possible that her entire identity, everything she had believed about her family and herself, was a lie? She picked up the photograph again. The man standing next to her grandmother, the one her family had never mentioned, seemed to glow with a new significance. Mr. Hayes's words came back to her. He had mentioned that the man was once suspected in a cold case that had been closed abruptly decades ago. The implications were dizzying. Was the man dangerous? Was he part of the reason her grandmother had hidden the truth? Mara's mind raced. Every interaction at the funeral, the frantic attempts to seize the box, her mother's refusal to talk, all of it suddenly made sense. The fear that had pulsed through her family wasn't about money. It was about truths that could destroy lives, including hers. As she sat with the envelope on her lap, Mara's phone buzzed. A voicemail. She hesitated before playing it. The line was scratchy, distorted, trembling with fear. A voice, low and urgent, spoke. "If you open the envelope, they're already coming." Mara froze. Her pulse pounded. She clutched the box, the brass key, the photograph, and the torn letter close to her chest. The words were both a warning and a threat. Someone knew she had opened her grandmother's final message. Someone was moving. And Mara realized at that moment that her grandmother had left her a trail of breadcrumbs leading into danger, and she had just taken the first step. Her apartment suddenly felt small, suffocating. Shadows seemed longer, corners darker. Every creak, every sound felt like someone approaching. Mara pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, mind spinning with questions she could barely comprehend. Who was coming? What would they do? And if the man in the photograph once suspected in a cold case was involved, what danger was she really in? She held her grandmother's envelope again, staring at the words, "You're not who you think you are." And then, as if the universe itself were taunting her, the silence in her apartment seemed to stretch infinitely, filled with the weight of unknown truths, the certainty of danger, and the inevitability of confrontation. What would you do if you found out your identity was a lie? Mara shivered. She knew one thing for certain. Opening the envelope had changed everything. Nothing could be the same again. And somewhere unseen, the people her grandmother had feared, or wanted her to fear, were already in motion. Mara returned home late that evening, exhausted from the revelations at the lawyer's office. The envelope, the photograph, the torn letter, the brass key. All of it weighed heavily on her, like carrying the secrets of generations. She opened her apartment door and froze. Something was off. The lock was intact, but the door had a faint scrape along its edge. Her pulse spiked. She stepped inside, the apartment eerily silent. Every shadow felt amplified. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. And then she noticed the box. The box she had left on the table that morning was gone. Panic rose. Her eyes scanned the room. There was no sign of forced entry, no missing valuables except the box. But something lingered in the air. A faint smell of cigarettes, strong and acrid. Her stomach sank. The smell was familiar. Her Uncle David was the only one who smoked indoors. She knelt, examining the floor. Muddy footprints led from the window to the table and out again. They were fresh. Someone had been here recently. Someone careful, someone who had watched her closely enough to know where the box was. Mara's hand shook as she dialed her uncle's number. His voice answered on the second ring, casual, even cheerful. "Hey Mara. Everything okay? Don't lie to me," she snapped. "Did you come into my apartment? Did you take the box?" There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally, voice tight. But Mara heard it, saw it, in the trembling of his hands when he lifted the phone to his ear, and heard it in the crack of his voice. His denial was weak, brittle, and desperate. Her mind raced. She knew she couldn't trust anyone, not even her family. And if the box was gone, whoever had it now held the power. Power her grandmother had meant only for Mara. Determined to reclaim it, Mara retraced her family's steps. Over the past decades, they had always met at an abandoned cabin deep in the woods for family meetings. No one outside the family knew about it. Mara drove through the twisting back roads, following every faint memory she had of the place. When she arrived, the cabin loomed like a relic of secrets, its windows dark, the wood weathered and gray. She approached cautiously, staying low among the trees. Inside, she could hear muffled voices. She crept closer, pressing her ear to the cracked wall. "If she opens it," one voice said, sharp and frantic. Mara recognized it immediately, her cousin's. "Everything we built for 40 years collapses. You know what's at stake." Mara's stomach sank. 40 years. Her grandmother's secret wasn't just a personal matter. It was a threat to decades of family legacy, lies, and hidden power. And now she was in the middle of it, uninvited but impossible to ignore. The voices continued, and Mara understood that her grandmother hadn't left the box to her by accident. She had chosen carefully, knowing that Mara's curiosity, her determination, would force the truth into daylight. Mara pressed herself closer to the cabin wall, heart hammering, as the full weight of the family's conspiracy hit her. The conversation ended abruptly, and silence fell. Mara waited, counting her breaths, then slipped inside the cabin through a side door she knew had been loosely boarded. The floorboards creaked under her feet, the air thick with dust and old smoke. And then she saw it. The box. Her box. Hidden under a loose floorboard, but not alone. Beside it was a dark, glistening stain, blood. Her heart stopped. She knelt carefully, the metallic weight of the box suddenly heavier in her hands, as if carrying the weight of what had happened in this room. She stared at the blood, trying to understand its meaning. Was it her family's warning? Has someone been hurt? Or worse, had someone died protecting this secret? The cabin seemed to close in around her. Every shadow felt alive. Every creak was a threat. She realized that the box, and the secrets it held, were far more dangerous than she had imagined. The warning from the voicemail, the messages, the family's desperation. It all pointed to one undeniable truth. Opening the box could unleash consequences that went far beyond herself. Mara pressed a hand to her chest, taking a deep breath. The bloodstain, the hidden box, the voices she had overheard. They were all pieces of a puzzle that she could no longer ignore. She knew the moment she picked up the box she had crossed a line. She had entered a battlefield, and her family was armed with lies, fear, and secrets that had festered for decades. Would you confront your whole family if you knew they were hiding something from you? Her eyes lingered on the box, the brass key she had tried earlier, and the bloodstain. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the pull of the truth. Dangerous, irresistible, and inevitable. And in that moment Mara realized, the family's war wasn't just around her. It was now inside her. Mara spent days planning before stepping into the sterile, echoing corridors of the hospital archives. Dust hung in the air like a suspended secret, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. She had made her way past locked doors, sign-in sheets, and wary clerks, all under the guise of research for a genealogical project. Every step brought her closer to uncovering something her family had spent decades burying. She opened the first bound ledger and flipped through pages of records carefully, as if disturbing the ink too roughly might wake the past itself. Her pulse quickened when she saw a familiar date, the one scribbled on the hospital tag in the photograph. There it was. A newborn, registered under the name Baby Girl Carter. No surname, no father listed, only a fleeting note in the margin. Mother arrived under duress. Mara's fingers traced the letters. Baby Girl Carter. Her grandmother had given birth. But the baby wasn't one of her known children. Mara's mind spun. How could this be? Who had been kept hidden? And why had the family erased every trace? She dug deeper into the microfilm records, scanning column after column. Every entry was meticulous, sterile, but then she hit a blank space. After 3 months, all records of the baby vanished. No transfer, no adoption paperwork, nothing. The child had disappeared. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. Whoever had taken the baby had done it with precision, and the secrecy surrounding it had been maintained for decades. Determined to uncover more, she tracked down a nurse who had worked at the hospital during that time. The woman was now in her 80s, frail but sharp-eyed. Her hands trembled slightly as she led Mara to a quiet side room, away from prying ears. The nurse began, her voice breaking. Your grandmother came that night, bruised, terrified. She was begging for help. I've never seen fear like that before in my life. She didn't speak much, just looked over her shoulder, as if someone was watching, waiting. And the father was a man everyone feared. Mara's stomach knotted. Who was he? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse leaned closer, her voice a fragile rasp. I can't say the name out loud, she said. But your grandmother's fear, it was real. He had power. And he had the ability to destroy anyone who got in his way. She paused, eyes narrowing as if measuring Mara's understanding. Then her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. Your family tree has more roots than branches, and one of them is poisoned. Mara's heart raced. She could feel the weight of those words settle into her bones. The roots of her family. Secrets, lies, hidden truths, stretched far deeper than she could have imagined. And one of them was toxic, corrupt, and dangerous. The nurse reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small object wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. She handed it to Mara with shaking hands. Mara unfolded it carefully and froze. It was a hospital tag. The same number she had seen pinned to the swaddled newborn in the photograph she had found under her grandmother's box. Mara stared at it, tracing the worn edges and the faded numbers with her fingers. This was no coincidence. Every step of her journey, the box, the photograph, the brass key, the torn letter, was leading her to the same horrifying truth. Her grandmother had given birth to a child no one in the family would ever acknowledge, and the consequences of that secret had rippled through decades. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the child been hidden? Who had taken her? And most importantly, who in her family had been complicit in keeping this secret? Mara felt a mix of anger, grief, and determination. She could no longer step lightly. The past had chosen her, and now the hidden child had become the central piece in a puzzle that had haunted her grandmother, and now Mara herself, for a lifetime. Do you think every family has that one secret nobody talks about? Mara held the hospital tag tightly, its cold metal grounding her in reality, while her mind spiraled into fear and possibility. She realized that discovering the truth about the hidden child was only the beginning. The family's fear, the box, the cold case her grandmother had protected, the poisoned root in the family tree. They were all threads of a story that, once unraveled, could change everything Mara believed about her family, her past, and herself. And as she left the nurse's apartment, tucking the hospital tag into her coat pocket, Mara knew one thing for certain. The box was no longer just a mysterious object. It was a key to uncovering a legacy of lies, danger, and secrets that had festered for generations. For days, Mara had stared at the box, turning it over, inspecting the scratches, tapping every edge, pressing and twisting every surface. She had tried the brass key again and again. It had never fit. She had even tried the old letters and photographs, wondering if they contained a hidden clue. And now, exhausted and frustrated, she sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, staring at the box as if it were daring her to unlock its secrets. Then, almost by accident, her fingers found a tiny, almost imperceptible groove along the underside. She pressed it, slid it slightly, and felt the mechanism click. Her heart leapt, a mix of fear and triumph coursing through her. The lock gave way with a soft metallic sound, and the top lifted. Inside, the contents were as heavy as the box itself, though they were paper, metal, and secrets. Mara's breath caught at the sight. Newspaper clippings, aged and yellowed, detailing a missing baby from decades ago. The headline screamed tragedy. Infant vanishes from local hospital. Investigation ongoing. And family pleads for safe return of child. Each article seemed to throb with history, each word a drumbeat of loss and fear. Letters between her grandmother and a detective, carefully folded, written in her grandmother's careful handwriting. They spoke in hushed tones, revealing panic, threats, and desperation. Mara read phrases like, "I fear what will happen if the truth comes out, and they cannot know. Protect the child at all costs." A birth certificate. It confirmed what Mara already suspected. The newborn from the photograph was indeed her grandmother's child. The certificate listed no father, only the name baby girl Carter, and a note about her being removed from hospital custody under special circumstances. A confession note, small, folded several times, written in hurried, trembling handwriting. Mara's hand shook as she unfolded it. The note revealed something unimaginable. The newborn had been taken by force, stolen from her grandmother, and raised as someone else within the family itself. Mara's mind reeled. She reread the note, her pulse hammering. She is one of you now. Hidden. Protected. But the truth may destroy everything. Mara's eyes darted across the room, her imagination whirling. Could it be her uncle, who had been shaking when confronted? Could it be her mother, whose tears had masked terror? Could it even be her? The thought was unbearable, yet she couldn't shake it. The possibility that she herself might be the child in question made her hands sweat and her stomach twist into knots. She sank to the floor, clutching the note, the clippings, and the letters. The weight of decades of secrecy pressed on her chest. Every argument at the funeral, every frantic warning from her family, every hesitation and lie now made sense. The box had been her grandmother's way of protecting the truth until Mara was ready, or brave enough, to face it. Mara's thoughts were interrupted by her shaking hands brushing against a small envelope tucked into the corner of the box. Her breath caught. It was labeled in her grandmother's careful handwriting. For Mara DNA test. The envelope was sealed, the paper heavy and authoritative. Her name was written across it in ink that seemed to pulse with significance. She stared at it, torn between fear and curiosity. Inside this box, she had found the first undeniable evidence of the family's deepest secret. And now the final piece, the DNA test, promised the truth that could confirm everything she had feared, or perhaps answer the questions that had haunted her for decades. Every instinct screamed caution. The envelope could destroy her, her family, her understanding of herself. And yet, the truth was calling, insistent, merciless, and unavoidable. If you found evidence that you were adopted, would you confront your parents immediately? Mara held the envelope in her hands, her pulse racing, mind swirling with possibilities. She knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Opening that test could confirm which branch of the family was poisoned, which roots had hidden the truth, and whether she was truly who she thought she was, or something else entirely. The box lay open before her, Pandora's chest of secrets, its contents whispering history, lies, and danger. And in that silence, Mara realized the final battle was about to begin. Mara stared at the sealed envelope in her hands for what felt like hours. Her fingers trembled, and her chest tightened as if the very air in the room had thickened around her. The DNA test sat there, heavy with decades of secrets, heavy with the power to redefine her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Finally, she took a deep breath, tore the envelope open, and unfolded the results. The letters and numbers swam before her eyes at first, but one line made her blood run cold. Not the biological child of the listed parents. Maternal lineage confirms identity. Baby girl Carter, born to grandma's name. Mara's mind reeled. Her hands shook as she reread the words. It was undeniable. She was not her parents' biological child. She was grandma's stolen baby. The very child taken from the hospital decades ago. Every whispered warning, every secretive glance, every tear and trembling hand in the family made sense now. Her grandmother had given birth in secrecy, her fear documented, her terror justified. And someone Mara had trusted as family, had stolen her from that moment, raising her as their own, hiding her identity, and burying the truth deep beneath decades of lies. Mara sank into her chair, the room spinning. The betrayal was staggering, but the revelations weren't over. The DNA documents included details about the father, a man whose name sent a shiver down her spine. He had been violent, feared, and connected to organized crime in the 1970s. He had the power to ruin lives and had likely influenced the lengths her grandmother's family went to cover the scandal. Mara felt anger rise, hot and bitter. The people who had taken her, the family who had hidden the truth, had done so out of fear, self-preservation, or perhaps even guilt. But in doing so they had stolen her childhood, her identity, and the chance to grow up knowing who she really was. Her mind raced as she considered the implications. Every argument at the funeral, every attempt to steal the box, every frantic whisper she had overheard in the cabin, it all made sense now. Her family had been protecting a secret so explosive it could destroy not just reputations but lives. And she had been living in the middle of it without knowing. She clutched the DNA test to her chest, feeling the weight of her grandmother's choices, her parents' lies, and the decades-long family deception pressing down on her. Her heart ached with betrayal, grief, and anger. How could people she had trusted manipulate an entire life so thoroughly? The room felt suffocating, every corner heavy with history and secrecy. Mara's thoughts spun toward the detective mentioned in her grandmother's letters, the one who had investigated the stolen baby decades ago. She had assumed he was long gone, retired, lost to the past. But a note included in the box hinted otherwise. He was still alive and he wanted to meet. Mara's pulse quickened. Meeting him could bring clarity or danger. The detective might have knowledge that could unravel even more of her family's secrets. But she also knew that confronting the past head-on carried risks. The father's shadow, the family's fear, and the unknown forces that had hidden the truth for decades. Her mind lingered on one question, gnawing at her relentlessly. How many lies had she lived? How many moments of her life had been built on deception? And now, with the DNA test confirming her identity, every choice, every relationship, every trust she had ever placed in her family was suddenly called into question. What would hurt more? Knowing your parents lied, or knowing your entire family did? Mara folded the DNA results, pressing them against her chest. Her grandmother's fear, her family's desperation, and her own stolen past now converged into a single chilling truth. She was at the center of a story that spanned decades, a story filled with deceit, danger, and secrets powerful enough to destroy lives. And as she stared out of her apartment window, Mara realized the next step was inevitable. She had to meet the detective, the man who had uncovered part of her stolen past, the man who might hold the remaining pieces, the man who could either illuminate the truth or drag her further into danger. The world outside seemed darker than before, but Mara's resolve hardened. She had been chosen by the truth, and now the detective would be the key to uncovering the rest. Mara arrived at the small, cluttered apartment of the retired detective, Mr. Langley, her pulse still racing from the whirlwind of revelations over the past weeks. His home smelled of old paper, leather, and faint tobacco smoke, The kind of scent that clung to decades of experience and unspoken truths. Mara set the DNA test, the hospital tag, and the photograph on the table before him. The detective's gray eyes studied her, sharp and calculating, yet softened with an unmistakable warmth. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as if preparing to lay bare the decades he had spent guarding a truth most of the world would never understand. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice steady, "what I'm about to tell you. It's going to change everything you thought you knew about your family, your past, and yourself." Mara swallowed hard, nodding. "I'm ready," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. Langley took a deep breath. "Your grandmother. She was trying to escape a man, your father, who was violent, dangerous, and deeply connected to organized crime in the 1970s. When she gave birth, she feared for her life and the child's life. She tried to leave quietly to protect you. But your family stepped in." Mara's heart pounded. "My family?" "Yes," Langley continued. "Someone had to intervene. They made a deal. Take the child, raise her as one of your own, sever all ties with her real mother, and keep the violent man away. They believed it was the only way to ensure your survival. They weren't protecting you because they loved you, but because they were protecting themselves. And in doing so, they thought they were doing the right thing." Mara's chest tightened, the words hitting like a hammer. "But why didn't anyone ever tell me?" "They believed telling you would put you in danger, or worse, break you emotionally." The man returned years later, threatening to expose everything. "Your family hid the truth to protect themselves, to maintain the illusion of safety." Langley's eyes softened, glinting with something Mara didn't expect. Sadness. "Your grandmother spent 40 years trying to reach you, Mara. Every attempt was blocked by fear, by lies, by the very people who raised you. The locked box. It was her final attempt to free you from the layers of deception, to give you the truth without putting you in immediate danger." Mara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The weight of decades of deception, love disguised as control, and fear disguised as protection pressed down on her chest. She could barely breathe, yet each revelation sharpened her resolve. Her grandmother had tried, through whispers, through letters, through the box, to give her a chance at reclaiming her own identity. Langley stood and moved to a small cabinet, producing a worn, sealed tape labeled in her grandmother's handwriting. "For my daughter." He placed it gently in front of Mara. "This is the last piece of the puzzle. Everything your grandmother wanted you to know. Everything she feared you might never discover. It's on this tape." Mara's hands hovered over it, hesitant, trembling. Every instinct in her body screamed caution, yet every fiber of her being urged her forward. The tape represented the culmination of decades of fear, protection, and love. It was her grandmother speaking directly to her for the first and last time. "Would you forgive a family who stole your identity for your own good?" Mara picked up the tape, feeling its weight, the gravity of history in her hands. The detective's gaze lingered on her. "Once you play that tape, Mara, there's no going back. The truth is irreversible. You will know everything. And some truths may be more dangerous than the lies you've lived with." Her chest heaved as she nodded slowly. Every revelation had brought her closer to the truth, yet the danger lurking in her family, in her past, and in the shadows of her father's criminal world still loomed large. She placed the tape into her bag, aware that playing it would open a door she could never close. Langley leaned back in his chair, the weight of years evident in his posture. "Your grandmother chose you, Mara. She trusted you with this knowledge because she believed you could handle it, because she believed you deserved the truth, even if it hurt." Mara sat in silence, absorbing everything. The family's decades-long war, her stolen identity, the hidden child, the dangerous father. Everything had led to this moment. She realized that the next step was no longer about discovery, it was about action. The box, the DNA test, the tape, and every secret her grandmother had left were now tools in her hands. And somewhere, in the shadows of her family's past, the people who had hidden the truth for so long were still watching, still waiting. Mara took a deep breath, steeling herself. The final revelation, her grandmother's voice, her grandmother's words, was waiting. And when she pressed play on that tape, the secrets that had shaped her life for 40 years would finally speak. Mara returned to her apartment, the tape heavy in her hands, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. Every revelation she had uncovered, Her stolen identity, the hidden child, the dangerous father, the family's decades of lies, had led her to this one moment. This was her grandmother's final message, the culmination of a lifetime spent in fear, love, and secrecy. With trembling hands, Mara placed the tape into the player, pressed play, and sank into her chair. The crackle of the tape was almost deafening in the quiet room. Then her grandmother's voice emerged, frail yet unmistakably hers. "Hello, my daughter." The voice began, trembling with emotion. "If you're hearing this, it means the secrets I've kept for so long are finally ready to be known. I am sorry. For the fear, the pain, and the lies. For the night I gave birth and you were taken from me. For the years I couldn't hold you. For the life you lived without knowing who you really were. I tried to protect you. And I pray that one day you understand why." Tears filled Mara's eyes as she listened. The tape recounted the abuse her grandmother endured at the hands of Mara's father, the violent man whose shadow had loomed over every part of their lives. It revealed the lengths her family went to cover up her grandmother's secret, the compromises, the fear, and the shame that had dictated their actions for 40 years. Her grandmother's voice broke as she continued, the sorrow tangible through the decades that separated them. "Please don't let them bury your truth like they buried mine," the tape pleaded. "Find courage, my daughter. Reclaim what is rightfully yours. Live knowing who you are, and never let fear chain your heart." Mara sat in silence for a long moment after the tape ended, the weight of her grandmother's words settling over her like a storm. Anger, grief, and determination fused inside her. She realized that revenge did not have to be violence. It could be truth, exposure, and justice served in the quietest, most powerful way. She arranged a family meeting. The same people who had fought, argued, and hidden for decades now gathered before her, faces masked with false calm and curiosity. Mara's voice was steady, unwavering as she recounted everything. Every secret, every deception, every cover-up. She told them plainly. The family's reactions ranged from stunned silence to trembling guilt. Faces flushed with shame, eyes filled with disbelief, and hands fidgeted nervously. The weight of 40 years of lies collapsed under the force of Mara's unwavering truth. Mara watched silently as the walls they had built around themselves crumbled. The shame was palpable, the consequences of their fear-driven actions undeniable. She felt no joy in their suffering, only the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming her identity, honoring her grandmother's memory, and ending decades of silence. When the meeting ended, Mara walked away with a sense of peace she had never known. She carried with her the box, not as a reminder of pain, but as the symbol of her journey. The moment she finally met her real mother, the moment she reclaimed the life that had been stolen, and the moment she freed herself from the lies that had bound her. If you were Mara, would you cut ties with the entire family? Or try to rebuild something from the ruins? Mara placed the box on her shelf, a silent testament to her grandmother's love and her own courage. She had learned that the deepest revenge was not violence but truth. And in that truth she had found freedom, identity, and the strength to live her own life on her terms. If this story has moved you, taught you the power of truth, or reminded you of the importance of family, take a moment to reflect, share your own stories, and honor the courage it takes to face the past. Click subscribe to join us in uncovering stories that touch the heart, awaken curiosity, and inspire courage, because it's never too late to reclaim your truth.